My name is Hilda Black. I am 63 years old as I begin writing this, though by the time you hear or read these words, I may be older, or, God willing, still alive to tell them myself. What I am about to recount will change forever the way you look at your own children, your own family gatherings, the quiet smiles across the Sunday dinner table. Because just 14 months ago, on a crisp autumn Saturday that was meant to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary, my only surviving son, Damian, and his wife, Melissa, pushed my husband Henry and me off a 90-foot cliff. We survived, barely, and in the shattered hours that followed, as I lay bleeding on jagged rocks with a taste of iron in my mouth and the echo of my own screams still ringing in my ears, Henry whispered the secret he had carried alone for 25 years. Damian had murdered his older brother Richard when they were teenagers. Henry had seen it happen, and he had helped cover it up. This is the story of how a perfect family unraveled thread by thread over 4 decades, until the only thing left holding it together was a lie so monstrous it nearly killed us all.
To understand how we got to that cliff, you have to understand the house first. It was a modest 2-story craftsman on Maple Lane in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. White siding, forest green trim, a wide front porch where Henry and I spent thousands of evenings watching fireflies and later grandkids chasing each other through the sprinklers. Henry built the porch swing himself the summer we moved in, 1962. He was 25 then, broad-shouldered from years in his father's carpentry shop, with calloused hands that could shape oak into something that looked like it had grown that way on purpose. I was 23, fresh out of teaching college, my head full of ideals about shaping young minds. We met at a church picnic. He spilled lemonade on my yellow sundress and spent the next hour apologizing while carving my initials into a scrap of pine. By Christmas, we were married. By the following spring, I was pregnant with Richard. Richard arrived screaming on a February morning in 1965, red-faced and furious at the cold world. He was always the bold one. First steps at 9 months, first words at 10, first to climb the tallest tree in the yard. He had Henry's build and my dark curls, and from the beginning he appointed himself protector of anything smaller than him. Stray cats, his baby brother when Damian came along 5 years later, and especially me. Damian was different from the start, quieter, watchful. Born in 1970 with pale skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. He rarely cried, even as an infant. When Richard would burst into a room like sunshine, Damian would already be there in the corner, observing. I told myself it was just temperament. Mothers do that. We explain away the shadows because the alternative is too frightening. The boys shared a bedroom upstairs until Richard turned 12. I can still close my eyes and see it. Bunk beds Henry built, model airplanes hanging from fishing line, Richard's side a glorious mess of comic books and half-finished inventions. Damian's side so tidy it looked unoccupied. On Sundays after church, we had family dinner at the big oak table Henry made from a single slab he found in an old barn. Richard would talk non-stop, plans for college, dreams of engineering, how he'd build us a retirement cabin one day. Damian would pick at his food, answer in monosyllables, eyes flicking up only when money or inheritance was mentioned in passing. I noticed, of course, but Henry always smoothed it over. Boys are different, Hilda. Damian will find his way. And I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative meant admitting something was wrong in the heart of my perfect family.
Richard was 20. home from his second year at Oregon State, interning at an engineering firm in Portland. He drove home most weekends in his beat-up blue pickup, bursting with stories. That summer, he seemed especially restless, spending hours in Henry's workshop poring over our old financial records. I thought he was just being responsible, planning how he'd help us when we got older. He'd always talked about that. "When I'm making real money, Mom, you and Dad are never going to worry about a thing." Damian was 15, sullen, spending more and more time away from home. He'd taken up with an older crowd, kids who smoked behind the high school and talked about getting out of Willow Creek the minute they turned 18. The arguments started small. I'd hear raised voices from the workshop, then sudden silence when I appeared. Richard's face tight with anger, Damian's blank and cold. One night in early October, Richard didn't come home for dinner. We waited until midnight, then 1, then 2. Henry drove the roads while I paced the kitchen floor until my feet went numb. At dawn, the police came. They'd found Richard's truck parked near the River Gorge trailhead, his body at the bottom. The official report? Accidental fall while hiking alone in the dark. No note, no signs of struggle, case closed within days. I wore the same black dress to his funeral that I'd worn to my mother's. Damian stood beside me dry-eyed while I sobbed until my ribs ached. Henry held me up, whispering, "We still have Damian. We have to be strong for him." Afterward, Damian changed overnight, suddenly attentive, helping with chores without being asked, bringing me coffee in bed when grief kept me there for days. I told myself it was guilt, healthy mourning, a boy stepping into his brother's shoes. How blind love makes us. The years blurred. Damian graduated high school, barely, apprenticed with Henry, showed real talent for carpentry. He met Melissa at 22, a pretty blonde nursing student with a laugh like wind chimes. They married in our backyard under the maple tree. I made her wedding dress from the same pattern I'd used for my own. 2 grandchildren followed, Lily in 2008, Ethan in 2011. Perfect, tow-headed angels who called me Grammy and climbed into my lap for stories about their brave Uncle Richard who went to heaven being an explorer. We aged. Henry's hands developed arthritis, but he still worked small projects. I retired from teaching at 60, started volunteering at the library. Our savings grew steadily. House paid off, modest investments, the land my parents left me. Nearly $250,000 by 2023. That's when the visits changed. Damian and Melissa began coming over more often, always with helpful suggestions, new life insurance policies, power of attorney just in case, selling the house that was too big for you now. At first, it felt like concern, then pressure, then something colder. I started noticing discrepancies in bank statements, small withdrawals I didn't recognize. When I asked Damian, who'd been helping with online banking, he said I must be mistaken. Henry grew quiet, withdrew. I caught him staring at Damian sometimes with an expression I couldn't name, part grief, part fear. One night in March 2024, after another tense dinner where Melissa had measured rooms with her eyes and talked about real estate values, I confronted Henry. "Do you think something's wrong?" He was silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in the smallest voice I'd ever heard from him, "There are things about Richard's death I never told you." My world tilted. He told me everything that night at the kitchen table, the same table where Richard used to do homework and Damian used to sit silent. How he'd followed Damian that October night because the boy had been acting strange. How he'd hidden in the trees and watched his sons scream at each other over stolen money. How Damian had pushed Richard deliberately, furiously, when Richard threatened to tell us everything. how Damian had stood over the body sobbing it was an accident until Henry emerged, how Henry, God forgive him, had chosen to protect the living son over justice for the dead one. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Once the truth was spoken, the air in our house changed. We walked on eggshells around Damian and Melissa's visits, pretending everything was normal while terror grew inside us like cancer. Damian's carpentry business, we learned through discreet inquiries, was failing. Over $150,000 in debt, creditors calling. He needed money fast, and we were the only source. Then came the invitation. Mom, Dad, for your 40th anniversary, let us take you to the mountains you've always talked about. A private trail, picnic at a beautiful overlook, just family. Henry and I knew instantly what it meant. We argued for days, refuse and risk a home accident, or go and try to gather evidence. In the end, we went. Henry hid his phone set to record. I wrote a long letter to my sister Harriet detailing everything and hid it behind the water heater. We packed light jackets, told no one where we were really going, and kissed our grandchildren goodbye with a heaviness neither Damian nor Melissa seemed to notice. The drive was 2 hours of forced cheer. Melissa sang along to old songs. Damian drove exactly the speed limit. The trail started easy, golden aspens, crisp air, bird song that felt like mockery. They led us gradually higher, always positioning themselves strategically, Melissa ahead taking photos, Damian behind to help if we got tired. The overlook they chose was a narrow rock outcrop with a sheer 90-foot drop, perfect for an accident, no witnesses, loose stones everywhere. They asked us to pose near the edge for pictures. Henry and I stepped back as instructed, hearts hammering. Melissa's smile changed, no longer sweet, but triumphant. Damian lunged. Henry grabbed his wrist at the last second, yelling, "If we go, you're coming too." Chaos, screams, all 4 of us tumbling over the edge, locked together. Impact. Pain beyond anything I'd imagined. Then Henry's whisper through bloodied lips, "Don't move, play dead." Damian and Melissa survived the fall with broken bones, but were mobile enough to crawl for help. They planned to tell rescuers we'd slipped accidentally while they tried to save us. But Henry's phone had recorded everything. Melissa's cold, "This'll be your last" photo, Damian's shove, their calm discussion afterward about how it worked perfectly except we fell too. Rescuers found us. I continued the act through the helicopter ride, through initial triage. A sharp-eyed nurse noticed my vitals didn't match someone truly unconscious and coaxed the truth from me with finger signals. Police took our statements, retrieved the recording, arrested Damian and Melissa in the hospital waiting room as they accepted sympathy cards from strangers. The trial lasted 3 months. National news, the family that fell together. Damian tried to blame Melissa. Melissa tried to blame financial desperation. Both failed. Life without parole for premeditated murder, Richard, and attempted murder, us. We healed slowly. Henry's spinal injury left him with a permanent limp. My shoulder never quite right, but we healed. We petitioned for custody of Lily and Ethan, won it after months of hearings, moved them into Richard's old room, painted it fresh colors, filled it with his old model airplane so they'd know their uncle. Some nights I still wake hearing the wind rush past me as we fell. Some mornings I make pancakes and expect to see Richard burst through the door with that unstoppable grin. But mostly these days, our house is filled with new laughter. Lily reading to Ethan on the porch swing Henry built 63 years ago, the one that's held every generation of this family. The table is still oak. The coffee still smells the same. But now when we gather, there are no shadows in the corners, only truth. And that, finally, is enough.